Hello everybody and welcome to our first lecture for this course on Chapter 1, the Basics of Statistics. This is mostly a review of what you've learned in your previous statistics class. Some of you might have just taken a statistics class, in which case you will remember quite a bit of this, but it won't be surprising to me if you've taken a statistics class a while ago and you don't remember a lot of this information, or even if you took your class on statistics pretty recently and have forgotten some of this information. So this is really a refresher for some of the important terms that we're going to be using throughout this class. And if what I discuss in this lecture today isn't thorough enough, you can look at our textbook, Chapter 1 of our textbook, but in more detail if you would maybe want to refer to your old statistics textbook that go over these terms in more detail. So our first term that we want to talk about is population. Remember, an entire group of individuals is called the population. In this class, this is a psychology statistical course, so mostly we're talking about people. And the entire group of people that you're interested in studying is called the population. So if I was interested in looking at the relationship between class standing of students at Miramar College, are they freshmen or sophomores, etc., and then their academic performance, what would my population be? Who am I interested in studying? Well, my population would be every single student at Miramar College, students who go to campus, classes on campus, students who go to classes online, students who take classes during the day, students who take classes during the night. All the students currently enrolled in Miramar College would be my population. But usually populations are so large that we can't study the entire population. If you think about all the students at Miramar College, it would be pretty hard for me to ask every single one of them the questions for my research study. And that's not a very large population. Imagine I was interested in doing a study on people who are diagnosed with depression. If I'm interested in doing a study on people who are diagnosed with depression, my population would be every single person, let's just say in the United States, diagnosed with depression. And that is a huge number of people. There is no way I could possibly ask every single person diagnosed with depression questions for my research study. So typically, because our populations are so large, we actually study a sample. A sample is a small group that's selected to participate in your study to represent the population. So because we cannot study the entire population, instead we pick a small group from that population, we call that a sample. We do our research study on the sample, and the goal is to use the results obtained from our sample to say something about the population, and that's usually our goal. We don't truly care about the results of our sample of, let's say we picked, I don't know, 50 students from Miramar College, and we asked them their standing in terms of how many units they have, and we also looked at their GPA, and we wanted to see a correlation. Is there a relationship between maybe people who have less units? Is their GPA lower or higher than those who have been here longer and have more units? My interest isn't in those 50 people in my sample. My interest is to be able to say something about the population, about everyone in the college. And so our goal is to use the results obtained from our sample to answer questions about the population. There are two branches of statistics. You might remember this from your statistics class. Descriptive statistics. These are statistics that help us organize our data, summarize our data, and communicate our information about our data. We might use tables and graphs in order to organize our data, frequency distributions, histograms, things like that. And then central tendency and variability are the measures we use to summarize our data. Central tendency, mean, median, and mode, and variability, standard deviation, variance, and range. Again, some of this may sound familiar to you. Hopefully it at least sounds a little familiar. But we're going to be going through this again in this course. In the beginning of the course, we'll focus on descriptive statistical techniques using SPSS. And then inferential statistics allow us to make inferences about our data. Inferential and inference, so those words go together. So we use our sample data, for data we gather from a small group of individuals, to make estimates or inferences about the larger population. And these are things like t-tests, z-tests, ANOVA, correlation. Those are the tests we'll be talking about. Since the sample is only a part of the whole population, our sample data provide limited information about the population, and we have to use these inferential statistics to tell us, do we think that what we're seeing in our sample is representative of the population? And that's the second part of this course. Another term that's important in statistics is the idea of variables. Variables is basically any information that you want to study, and it could be anything: income level, aggression level, test scores, voter preference, whatever it is you're interested in studying. As long as what you're interested in studying can take on at least two different values, then we call it a variable. So variables have to be able to take on at least two different values. If there's only one option, if there's only one choice, then we call that a constant. And we can't study it this way because our goal is to study variability, how people are different. So variables must be able to take on at least two different values. And variables can range from only having two values. Are you right-handed or left-handed? Male, female, married, not married. Those would be variables with two values, to variables that have many different values, like what is your score on your statistics final? And it could be anywhere from 0 to 100, right, with everything in between. What's the temperature where you live? It can go from negative, I don't even know how cold does it get in Alaska and Antarctica and things like that, to very, very hot, 115 degrees in the summer in some valleys, in some deserts. So can go from two values to many different values. As long as they can take on more than one value, we have a variable. And as I said, variables and variability is really the key concept in statistics. We are trying to explain variability in all of our studies. Our studies really come to ask the question of, why are people different? So if I'm interested in studying level of depression, my question is really, why do people have different levels of depression? Why are some people more depressed than others? And is it due to, we can think of lots of different reasons why we might try to explain that. Is it due to their age? Is it due to how many friends they have? Is it due to neurotransmitters in the brain? You can think of lots of different possible explanations, but what we're really trying to do is understand the variability, why people are different. As we talk about variables through the class, remember that they represent variability or differences, and we really want to understand why people, in this case, since we're in a psychology class, are different. Why do people have different IQs? Why do people have different GPAs? Why do people have different levels of anxiety? Whatever it is, we're really interested in variability, and we'll keep coming back to this idea throughout the class. There are two main types of variables, and you might remember these: an independent variable or a dependent variable. When you set up an experiment, you're looking at the extent to which our independent variable causes a change in the dependent variable. So what's our independent variable, or IV? We'll use that as our abbreviation throughout this class. You can think of your independent variable as your manipulated variable. It's the one that the researcher chooses and chooses its values. Also, in a cause and effect relationship, which is really what we're trying to do in our studies, is to try to figure out cause and effect, the independent variable is the causal variable. So if I'm thinking that, let's see, well, I think actually I'm going to go to the next page for that part, but let me just go to give you the definition of dependent variable, or DV. DV is the observed variable, it is the measured variable, and it's what we think is going to change after we manipulate the independent variable. This is the effect in our cause and effect relationship. So now as I go here, for example, does the color of the paper a test is printed on, white or blue, influence a student's test scores? So our study is questioning, does color of paper that a test is printed on influence students' test scores? And then my question would be, what is the independent variable and what is the dependent variable? If you're not sure, think for a minute, pause this presentation, think about it and write it down. When you're ready, restart this. And hopefully now you're back. Our independent variable, that's the causal variable, it's the manipulated variable, and in this case it would be color of paper. And we would say that color of paper, or the variable color of paper, has two levels. In this case, the levels are white and blue. And as I said previously, the independent variable, the levels are chosen by the researcher. So I chose white compared to blue. I could have easily chosen red compared to green, or gray compared to purple. These were just my choices for whatever reason. So that's the variable that I manipulate, and it's the cause. We think that color of paper is going to cause a change in the dependent variable. This is the measured variable of students' test scores. So students' test scores is our dependent variable. This is where we expect to see our effect. And this is the measured variable, meaning I don't manipulate it, I just measure it. I have students take a test and then I get their scores. I don't manipulate it, that would be unethical for many reasons. I measure it. So the independent variable, that's the manipulated variable, the causal variable, and the dependent variable is the measured variable, and it is not manipulated. It's the effect. So as we said, the independent variable is the variable you manipulate, has at least two levels. You must be comparing at least two groups. The dependent variable is the one that you measure. It's related to or caused by changes in the independent variable. And we didn't talk about this much, and we won't too much in this class, but there are other variables we call confounding variables. These are ones you want to think about. These are variables that you try to control or randomize away in your research study. These are ones that can make the patterns in your data hard to understand. For example, I'm going to go back to this slide. If we had two groups, a group of students who took this test on white paper, a group of students who took the test on blue paper, and it was the exact same test, right? And we want to see test scores. We would have a confounding variable if it just so happened that I gave all the white papers, all the white tests to female students, and I gave all the blue tests to male students. If I see a difference in students' test scores compared when I look at the group that got the white test versus the blue test, can I really say it was color of paper that caused the change in test scores? Well, I have a confounding variable of gender because I don't know if it was white versus blue paper that caused a test score, change in test scores, or was there really a difference in performance when comparing males and females on this test? In that case, I have a confounding variable. So the confounding variables are one you want to think about as you're designing your study. You try to randomize them. For instance, you want to have equal numbers of males and females in both groups in order for it not to be an issue. All right. Your textbook talks about two kinds of variables. This is important for SPSS, important for understanding what types of statistical tests will run. You can talk about variables in terms of, are they group variables or score variables? Group variables are variables that assign people to groups. For example, this idea of doing a study on people who take a test on white paper versus blue paper. That would be a group variable. People are in one of two groups, blue or white. So if we're interested in variables that could break this class into groups, what type of variables could we come up with? So if we were trying to break up the students who are taking this class into groups, type of variables could we come up with? If you would, pause this for a second and write a couple ideas down. Hopefully you've done that. And so what are some ways we could break this class into groups? Well, we could do male or female. So gender could be a category. We could do employed or unemployed, right? Employment status. Are you employed or unemployed? Those would be two groups. Marital status. And you could have two groups. You could married versus not married, or you could have many groups. Married, single, dating, divorced, living together. I don't know. You could have many, many groups. The idea is that when you're looking at a group variable, people fall into one group, and the groups don't really have any numbers that are associated with them. They're just categories. Another type of variable would be a score variable, and these are variables that represent how much or how many of something we have. These usually are variables that are represented by numbers. So if we were interested in variables that score variables that could be used to describe people in this class, what types of variables would we come up with? So some kind of variable that would, we would kind of measure people on a number scale. So think about that for a second, and if you need to pause this, go ahead and do so. So what are some score variables? Well, something like age. We could ask everybody your age, and that would be measured as a number, and that would be a score variable. Height, weight, those are all score variables. I could give you some kind of questionnaire on your interest level in statistics. From 0, not interested at all, to 10, super, super interested, and have you all answer that survey, and that would rate you on a score variable. So anything where we could, your GPA, score variable. All right. Other ways to classify variables using scales of measurements, you probably learned these terms in your previous statistics class instead of group versus score, which is really important for SPSS. This is a little bit more detailed of a division of types of variables, nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. And we're going to go through these in a little bit more depth. And again, you probably heard these before. Nominal variables, these are categorical or named variables. This is the same as a group variable that we just talked about. So when people fall into some kind of a category, nominal, named groups or named categories, that's a nominal variable. Ordinal, this is used for observations where data have rankings, like first place, second place, third place. You need different statistics for this kind of variable, first, second, third, and fourth, and we actually won't be using ordinal data in this class. If you wanted to use data like that, you would learn about it in a different statistics class later on. So in this class, we really aren't going to use ordinal data, but ordinal has to do with rank order, where you don't have anything except first place, second place, third place, and you want to use that data to come up with some kind of conclusions. Interval and ratio, these are our two score data categories. They are broken up into a little bit more detailed description when we discuss interval versus ratio, but in either case they're both score variables, and in terms of running the analysis on SPSS, we consider them the same. We use them the same. But it is important to understand the difference. I'm going to go ahead and go through these next slides that have a little more detail about these types of variables, but remember, nominal is the same as group. Ordinal we won't be using in this class, and interval and ratio are the same as score variables. So going through this quickly, nominal or group variables, as I said, this is when people are assigned to different levels of a variable: male, female, marital status, single, married, divorced, widowed, eye color, religion. When people are assigned to some kind of a category, that would be a nominal or grouping variable. Ordinal, as I said, first, second, this is rank order, first, second, third place in a race, popularity of TV shows, they get the most popular TV show ratings, what was the most watched TV show of the week, the second most watched TV show of the week, etc. This is complicated data to use because the size of the interval between the numbers is not equal. So these numbers like 1, 2, and 3, first, second, third, all you know is that in terms of, let's say, TV show popularity, more people watched the first rated show than the second rated show. But you don't know anything about the difference between these two numbers. If you think about the week when the Super Bowl is on, the first most popular TV show is going to be the Super Bowl by many, many, many more people than whatever the second rated TV show is that week. Whereas in a typical week, the first and second place TV shows in terms of popularity might be very close together. And so that makes this more complicated data in order to analyze. And as I said, it's not something we're going to work on in this class, but nonetheless, for this chapter, you do need to just understand that concept, that term. Interval and ratio, these are both score data categories, and they are extremely similar. In fact, they're identical, except for one small difference between them. In terms of SPSS, we use interval and ratio data exactly the same, but I will describe the difference here for you because it is important to understand to some extent. Interval, these are score data, so there's number data, and there should be equal distance between the numbers on whatever scale it is you're talking about. So intervals scale, we're talking about equal intervals between the numbers on the scale. So one of the best examples of an interval type of measurement is temperature. Temperature is a number scale. You can say what the temperature today is, let's say 88 degrees, and somewhere else it's 70 degrees, and somewhere else it's 60 degrees. There's a number variable, making it a score variable. And on the temperature, on the thermometer, we assume there is an equal distance between 70 and 71 degrees, right? That's 1 degree difference. And that's the same as between 88 and 89 degrees, 1 degree difference in temperature. And that's also the same difference as between 30 and 31 degrees. Each interval on the scale, so going from 30 to 31, 31 to 32, 32 to 33, those are equal intervals in terms of an increase in temperature. The big difference between the interval scale and the ratio scale, which we'll talk about next, is that in an interval scale, we have no true zero, which means that, for instance, on a scale of temperature, has anyone here, if you think, have you ever been to a place where it's 0 degrees? Well, if you have, wow, good for you. I've never been somewhere where it's 0 degrees. Seems very, very cold. 0 degrees is a point on the scale, but it's not a true zero. A true zero would mean, what does the concept of zero mean mathematically? Nothing, right? Nothingness, empty, right? 0 is a point on the scale of temperature, but it doesn't mean there is no temperature. It doesn't mean the absence of temperature. It's just another temperature, and it's a very, very cold temperature, right? So although 0 is a point on our scale, it's not a true zero, meaning nothingness or the absence of a quality. The difference with the ratio scale, this is where, again, the points on the scale are all equal distance from each other, but there is a true 0 point, meaning 0 actually means 0. So if something weighs 0, it has no weight. Something is it has no height, right? It can't be measured. It has no height. So 0 actually means 0. This is the case for many of our more kind of physical types of measurements. If I'm counting how many times somebody clicks a mouse on a computer keyboard in 30 seconds, and they click the mouse 0 times, well, that means 0. They didn't click the mouse. It's the absence of mouse clicking. That would be a ratio scale. For our purposes, interval and ratio scales are used the same in terms of our statistics in this class and in terms of what we need to use for SPSS. All right, so examples of variables and their scale of measurement. If we were doing a cookie experiment, which sounds awfully good to me, nominal might be the name of cookies. Perhaps we're interested in studying Chips Ahoy versus Oreos. Those are two different types of cookies, groups of cookies, and so those would be a nominal category. We could have people rank their favorite cookie, first place, second place. Those would be ordinal rankings, right? Because we're placing them in a rank order. And again, we don't know how close or how far apart, right? If I had you eat Oreo and Chips Ahoy, you might say like, oh, Oreo is way better for me. I like it so much better than Chips Ahoy, so Oreo is first place and Chips Ahoy second place. Or you might say, gosh, they're so close. They're both delicious. I don't know how I'm going to make this decision, but I guess I like Oreo a teeny tiny bit more than Chips Ahoy, so Oreo gets first and Chips Ahoy gets second. And so the difference between first and second on that scale can be very different. Interval, something like the temperature of cookies. How do you like your cookies coming out of the oven? I don't know, we could have them coming out of the oven at different times and look at the temperatures, right? Do you like them right out of the oven, super hot, and put a thermometer in and get the temperature there versus 10 minutes later versus half an hour later, something like that. Ratio, I don't know, we put people in a room with lots and lots of cookies and ask them to eat as many as they can, and we count how many cookies are left after half an hour. So you can think of different ways that you can measure variables. Last concept in Chapter 1 is the idea of reliability and validity. Again, you might have talked about this in your statistics class. You probably talked about it or will talk about it more if you take a research methods class. These are two important concepts when you're designing an experiment. reliable measure, so this can be a questionnaire or some kind of test or whatever it is you're using in your study. You want your measure to be reliable, meaning that it is consistent. So if I have a bathroom scale and I weigh my first participant, I put him on the scale and he weighs 150 pounds. Then I take him off the scale and I put him right back on the scale, and nothing has changed, and now the scale says 250 pounds. And then I take him off the scale and put him right back on the scale, and now it says 75 pounds. Do I have a reliable measure? No. That bathroom scale is not reliable, and it's pretty much useless. Our data would be useless if we used a measure like that. And that would be the same for questionnaires, if we're doing anxiety questionnaires or depression questionnaires or life satisfaction questionnaires. Researchers spend a lot of time designing these kinds of measures or questionnaires that they produce consistent responses. Valid has to do with the idea of, does your measure actually measure what you want it to? So for instance, if I want to measure weight and I put somebody on a scale, well, that should be a very valid way to measure weight. If I said to you, I'm going to measure depression by asking you your favorite color, because I think if you pick the color blue or gray as your favorite color, that'll mean you're depressed, because those are kind of sad colors. And I think if you pick something like red or yellow or orange, those are happy colors, and so you're not depressed. Well, that is not a valid measure of depression, so please know that. No matter what your favorite color is, there isn't a correlation there. That's not really a good way to measure depression. Now, hey, that would be very consistent. It would be reliable, because I could say to you, today, what's your favorite color? And tomorrow, what's your favorite color? And you might give me the same response every time. But if I then say I'm going to use your answer to what's your favorite color as a measure of how depressed you are, well, then that wouldn't be valid. So measures can be reliable and not valid, not reliable and valid. And what you're hoping for is whatever you're using in your study is both reliable, meaning consistent, and valid, meaning really actually measuring what you want it to. So if you have a scale that reads 5 pounds, every time you place a 10-pound bag of potatoes on it, is this scale reliable? Is it valid? Why or why not? Think about this for 1 second, or pause this presentation if you need to for a second. All right, is this score reliable, or is the scale reliable? Well, yeah, it is reliable, because it's giving me that same answer of 5 pounds every single time I put a 10-pound bag on it. It is very consistent. But is it valid? Is it giving me a good, accurate measurement? Well, no, it's not. So in this case, we have a reliable scale, but it's not valid. All right, well, I think we finished chapter 1. So go ahead and review some of those terms in your textbook, as well as in maybe your old statistics book if some of these terms are confusing to you. And thank you very much for listening.